So you've probably, I would imagine most have probably seen the video, some part of it anyway, of that young girl that was killed on a train over in America, right? A terrible video, terrible video. And for those that don't know, I think her name is Iryna Zarutska. She's a 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee, and she moved to North Carolina in America. Was on a train coming home from work, and a black guy behind her just got up, and that was the end of it. But that was the end of her life, right? But the video just watches her slowly fade and die and fall off her chair and slump onto the ground. It's rough stuff. It's rough stuff, but it is not that it's become normal, but it's something that Western societies have had to become more and more acclimatized to, right? The immediate risk to your, not just throwing a few slaps, but the immediate risk to your life now, right? And nowhere is really spared from this, right? Ireland has had its moments, right? The George Floyd thing, the Black Lives Matter thing, protests, or if you want to call them that, or just straight out stampedes and riots, right? Where white people were being targeted, Irish people being targeted by these mobs, right? And again, if you take these stories in isolation and then react to them, right? Your response and your reaction, your emotional reaction to it is probably perfectly normal, right? Especially in Ireland, right? So if you take, Ireland has been largely, predominantly 95, 99% Irish, and then over the last few decades, maybe mixed with Europeans, and then bang, straight up, mixed with Middle Eastern people and Indian people and African people and people from nearly all parts of the earth, right? And a natural reaction or a natural response to that, right? And well studied, well documented, all that stuff. Robert Putnam's Bowling Alone speaks about this, of the mix of diversity, right? When you start mixing different peoples and groups together, the social capital of the people or the community, right, it starts to deteriorate. And social capital literally can be boiled down to the trust that each neighbour has in the other people in their community and in their community at large, right? So sitting out the front drinking cups of tea in the evening, this sort of thing, that starts to fall apart, right, as soon as you start mixing different ethnic groups and different races together. So that's known, right? And now what you see with the media, academia, who constantly trumpet and blow up minorities, right? They sell the idea that minorities are entitled to and justified in any reproach or any reprise they feel they can exercise on a native population based on that minority's historical story, right? The woes of time before they were born. So you naturally see an escalation in violent crimes out of an already naturally tense situation of shoving different groups of people in together. You then see violent crime. You then see the guards unwilling to have people named in court because it'll fan flames, right? Because of the political climate, we won't release the name. But then the name is released and people go, not surprised, it's not Paddy Murphy, right? Or it's not a Paddy Murphy. And as I said, people have had to become increasingly more, not accepting, but acclimatized to this sort of thing, right? You then see the media not reporting on some stories with the same angle as they did on other stories, depending on the racial components involved in the case, right? So if it is an Irish person that does something, that person will be named Irish white male, largely males, Irish large male, Irish white male in a news story, right? But then if it's a foreign person that commits a crime, it's person unnamed because of whatever. Or they'll say Dublin man or Clonmel man, right? Even though this person's name is clearly not native to either of these places, right? And this has become blatant, right, over the last few years, and obvious to the point of, I don't know what legal term you'd put on it or what lawful term you'd put on it, but when you start to couch all of these things together, right, you can clearly see Leo Varadkar talking about there's too many white people in managerial positions in Ireland, right? So boiling it down to core race, you can see all the way up and down the fractal, right, of society, that there's an emphasis on pushing racial and ethnic tensions, right? And this story is no different, okay? This story is a tragedy. I think the Department of Justice in America are seeking the highest penalty that they can for this crime, which, as far as I understand it, up to and including the death penalty, right? Or up to the death penalty. And may he get it, right? May he get it. Fine. Because you have to react to people like this, that are willing to commit these sorts of crimes with the brutality that those people are willing to inflict on another person, right? Willingly. That is the only response to that. You don't meet violent creatures and violent people with compassion, right? You just don't. Especially when there's a clear track history of no respect for other people, right? No consideration for other people. So what do we do with that, right? Because this girl's story has easily been replicated in Ireland, right? And we know that there has been stories of the rape has increased in Ireland, right? Murder has increased in Ireland. Violent crimes have increased in Ireland. Domestic abuse has increased in Ireland. All that sort of stuff. So what you're going to get is not even a knee-jerk, perfectly natural and instinctual reaction to this, which is when a native population sees an influx of people from wherever, right? Wherever. They could be green men coming in, and they see that there's a tendency in the green men to be a little bit more, whatever the characteristic is, than the natives. The natives then will characterize those green men as whatever it is they're tending to do more than the native people. This is obvious stuff, right? But this will be called racism. And racism literally just means, or is used as a stick to beat you out of your senses, right? You cannot be perceiving reality correctly. Okay? You can't be taking notes of what's going on and drawing conclusions from it. You can't do that. That's racist. It's immoral, right? Don't do that. But that will happen nonetheless, right? And the more people are shut down from being able to have that conversation of, right, we've brought in loads of these people. What are them people like? And we don't have time to go around and interview each of these people individually or follow the lives of these people to be able to assess what they are like individually. We don't know. No one has that time. No one's going to do that, right? So you make loose generalizations based on pattern recognition. If this thing seems to follow this person, then that person must be closely related to this thing, right? Simple stuff. Like a child that gets bit by a dog once. It could take a lifetime to get over that fear, if at all. Is that fear irrational because it's long-standing over time? Maybe. But is there a legitimate reason as to why that fear got developed in the first place? Absolutely. Okay? Now, with the instinctual reaction, as the more that people are shouted down and chastised for having this conversation or for trying to talk about a new part of reality that has been imposed on them, the more the contents of that conversation move from thinking of it analytically to experiencing it emotionally, right? And that's all fine, but you need balance in that. And when the media and the guards and the court systems and the politicians are trying to silence and morally persuade and blackmail you away from having that conversation openly and honestly, they deny you that other wing of the seesaw, right? So the seesaw is unbalanced now. It just doesn't work, right? So you have people that will respond to this emotionally, and it will churn and burn away inside of them for a long period of time, up until the point when there's a release valve. And this girl's story in America is looking like it could be one of those release valves, where there's a momentary window where people are angry enough to not care anymore. And that emotion that is probably long-standing and boiling gets a chance to release itself. It's seeking expression, right? And it will come out in rage and violence and protests and all of that sort of stuff. And again, who can argue with it, right? Who can argue with it? I'm not here to dissuade you from that. Don't be breaking the law. Don't be jeopardizing your life or other people's lives. That's common sense. You don't need me to tell you that, right? That's common sense. But I would just suggest to people that there's the surface level stuff of reality, and then there's also those that are sitting back observing it and saying, right, how can we benefit out of moving this piece here and then allowing this piece to end up right there too, right? How can we benefit from this? And I think that the current governments across the West, nearly unanimously, right, across the West, their time is finished. I believe their time is finished. I think that they know this. I think that they will be held account, or the threat of them being held account, the reality of their past deeds and actions catching up on them and turning criminal is very, very, very likely. And I believe that those that are in power across the West will naturally do whatever they want to do or whatever they can do to retain that power and to safeguard their freedom going forward, and maybe their lives too, okay? So with the interlacing of the Irish government, the media, the court systems and the guards and the NGOs and everything else, the academic element of it, the whole lot of it, right? I would not be surprised if you'd start to see more of an intense push towards race wars, right? Because if the different ethnic groups and racial groups in a country are too busy destroying each other, what are they not doing? They're not, number one, they're not doing what's best for the country. They might think they are, right? But if it's manufactured and if it's allowed to smolder and explode and go on for a long period of time, those that are in power are just sitting back going, lovely, lovely. We're all right now, Joe. We're okay. They're not looking at us anymore. Right? And this is the delicacy of the situation that we're all in, right? Because I do believe that Western nations, to a large degree, are being held hostage, right? They're being held hostage by these mercenaries that have been brought in and dotted around the whole country, right? Are they armed? Who knows? We don't know. If they were, we certainly wouldn't be told. And if they weren't, we certainly wouldn't be told. And even if we were told, based on previous history, can you trust anything that comes out of the media's mouth or the state-sponsored media's mouth, right? RTE, or out of any of these politicians? You can't trust anything they say. Take it with a grain of salt. So, I would just suggest to people that there's more than one way of skinning a cat, right? And giving in to the desire for brutal revenge, justice, short term, there's probably glory in it, right? Long term, whose interests are really being served if we allow this country to fall into that, right, is just perpetual race wars. There's a time and a place for things, and we all need to make the decision on when our time and the place for a certain thing is met. I don't think anyone can tell you when that is, because they're not you, right? But just always weigh it up first. Always weigh it up.